This video will cover Pop Run Local, which is the PopperVR method to run a ROM-based game inside the VR environment. In the demo video and some of the other demo videos that you've seen probably already, we've done this with MAME, which is maybe a very common way of doing this, but you could certainly do this with other emulators, other ROMs, and we're going to talk a bit about that today. We'll start with the wiki and we'll just look at the method before we get into Blender or into VR. So let's scroll down. And here we are, Pop Run Local. There's not really much to it, right? It's the naming convention, Pop Run Local. It's going to allow you to run ROM-based games such as MAME, and that's what we'll do in this example, and stay in the VR room while you're playing, which I think is really cool. So Pop Run Local, you're going to do an underscore, you're going to do the ROM name, and we'll see how that is linked up with Games Manager and the ROM field. Then an underscore, then a portion of the Windows title name, right? In this case, it's Asteroid, right? So if you were to launch MAME, launch Asteroids, in the window title, and I'll show you how to make sure you're in windowed mode for MAME, but you'll see that Asteroid is part of that, or the name of the game is part of that window title. And then an underscore, and then if you need to, you have the ability to do an X flip or a Y flip, or both. So if you go into VR and you launch your game and it's not oriented correctly, you have these two fields that you can add onto the end. And then of course always remember that trailing underscore. The other thing we should look at is in the wiki there is a setup for MAME. Now with PopperVR, you always want to make sure you start out with a working Popper environment, working VPX environment. And in this case, if you're going to use MAME, you need to make sure you have a working MAME environment before you even get started with PopperVR. So on the Nailbuster site, for the MAME setup, there are the start scripts. You'll have to likely edit them for your use to make sure that the paths are correct and the type of executable is correct. But once you have that set up and you've imported your ROMs, then you should test MAME. Here we are looking at the emulator setup in Popper, just quickly for you to see how I set mine up. So here's my emulator for MAME. Of course, I gave the title MAME. I point to the version of MAME and where I have it installed. The game file type is zip, right, because our ROMs are zipped. If someone hasn't set up MAME before, just so you know, your ROMs typically have to be built against the version of MAME that you use. So I have a little bit of an older version. I have MAME 219, but I do have some ROMs that are built against MAME 219. I have a media directory. In fact, Popper comes with a default sort of MAME media directory, so I just pointed to that. And then if we go into the launch setup, you'll see the scripts as you just saw. The one thing I did add here is this bit about writing to this file. This file is important. This is how PopperVR knows that a game is running and when the game exits. So it's looking for that file. So you need this little bit in here. Okay, and you need it in the close as well to get rid of it, right? To know that, okay, we're done playing the game. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you was a little bit about the MAME, the actual MAME settings. So here we are in MAME. I'm using the 64-bit version, but I'm sure you could use other versions. And the one thing I want to show you is if we go into Configure Options and we go into Video Options, you want to set up your video options similar to this. Very important, you want window mode. And what you'll find is that if you set your options up like this, when you run MAME on your desktop, the window should be fairly small. That's important. If the window fills up your whole desktop, that's not going to work. So you want this windowed mode. You want Popper to be able to find that window and to be able to kind of paint that window into your VR environment. Okay, so now you've set up MAME, you've tested it outside of PopperVR, and now you'd like to use it within the environment. So we're in Blender at the moment, and I'm in a model of an arcade. You've seen this in some of the demo videos briefly, but what we didn't do in those videos was wire up all of these cabinets. So I've taken the time to wire up all of the cabinets at this point. There are a few that I'm still fixing, and I'll talk about that. But you can do this. You could also use MAME in other creative ways, or PopRunLocal, I should say, right? Because it goes beyond just MAME. You could just put it on a surface, on a wall, right? You could do a plane like we've done with the other methods. These models in this room are all pulled, and the room itself actually, are all pulled from 3D Arcade. So you could swap out the models, you could put in different models, and the method or the way of doing this will always be the same. So for instance, let's look at Defender. I'm just going to swirl around here a little bit and zoom in on it. The first thing I'd want to do and try with this, and it won't always work, but it's worked quite a bit. Actually, I did 40 plus machines, and I would say at least 35 of them this worked. So all I had to do was select the monitor. You got to click a few times to get to it. So you select that monitor. Let's head over to outliner mode, and I'll press period to jump to that. And then you just want to name the monitor with the proper method. So pop run local and underscore. Now I know this ROM is called defender.zip. And then the title of the window will have Defender in it. So I'm going to put Defender and a trailing underscore. Now, because I like to organize things, I'm going to move this all the way up, and I've created a collection called PopRunLocal. So let's just drop that in there, and we can go in here, and here we are with Defender.zip. Now, there's another step. There is something else we need to do back in Games Manager, so let's take a look at that. Okay, we're back in Popper's Game Manager, and I've selected Defender, and when I look at it, what I put here is defender.zip in the ROM field. You won't have this by default when you simply import your ROMs, but you'll need to set that in order for the linkage to work, right? Remember, in PopRunLocal, it's the name PopRunLocal and underscore the ROM name, which this is where we find that, and then an underscore, and then the win title. So again, and this is why any of your ROM-based games would work for this. As long as you fill in this ROM field and it can match it up, it's gonna load it. So I'm gonna click save on that. Okay, in Blender, we're gonna export this model to GLB, and I'm gonna overwrite my default room. And now let's check it out in VR. Okay, we're in our arcade. We wired up Defender in our model. Now let's give it a try.
Please wait. I am now loading up the game. Have fun.
Now the first thing we're going to want to look for on this first run of it is it oriented or situated correctly? So we'll take a look here once it gets finished booting up. And look at that. It looks like, yep, it's upside down. And that's in the Y axis. Remember, Y in PopperVR and Unity, really, Y is up and down. So we need to flip our Y. Okay, so we're back in Blender. Now, one thing I want to note, when I launched the PopperVR that time, I did launch it from Popper. I had Popper running, then launched PopperVR, and the reason for this in this test is we're actually launching a game, and we need Popper under the covers running to launch the game. So don't just simply launch the PopperVR executable. Make sure you're launching Popper and then using the op menu and launching PopperVR, and then go in and try your game. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I know in some cases we could just, depending what we were doing, we could just launch the PopperVR executable. So the thing we need to fix here from viewing it in VR was we need to update our method and rotate the Y. So let's do that. And I'm going to add that trailing underscore, hit enter, and now let's go back to full view, and we're going to export this again so that PopperVR gets the new update. Let's check it out in VR. Okay, we are back in VR. We've updated our PopRunLocal method for Defender to include the Y flip. Let's try it.
Please wait. I am now loading up the game. Have fun.
Now this time, hopefully, our view should be just the way we need it. If not, we might need to add the X flip. But look at that. That looks perfect. We can read it. That's perfect. Okay, one thing to note, when exiting these games, you use the menu option to exit. You could also use the op menu. There is an exit game option. So just wanted to point that out. Another thing I should talk about when we're looking at some of these games, some of these models really, you can see how this model has, let me just jump here, this model has a piece of glass in front. It's not truly transparent, so even if you select in Blender the monitor that is behind it, while the game will play, you won't be able to see it. So what I've done is I've either removed this glass if it was possible with the model. I did try playing with transparencies. I couldn't get it to work, but I'm not a Blender expert. So maybe if you're a Blender expert, you can make that work and have a piece of clear glass and then the monitor behind it, which would be neat. But I've just hidden it. The other thing you could do is use that surface as the actual place for PopperVR to paint the game onto. The final option, and I did that, I believe, on this machine, was I added another plane. And as we look at this, I can see that the image I put on the plane is actually backwards, which I can flip very easily. This is just an image, a static image on these machines. But I did put a plane in here into this cabinet, and then made sure to map that plane up so that
I am now loading up the game.
map that plane so that it could play the game onto that. So just another trick or tip. Just for your reference, you can see in the top right corner here, this is how small the MAME window is when it launches. If your MAME window isn't really small like that, it's filling up your whole screen, then go back to the beginning of the video where I talk about the MAME settings, because your video options are off and that will mess up things for you in PopperVR. Okay, I found a little trick for the case where there's a screen like this, a piece of glass in front of it, how to make it visible, or transparent I should say, so that the monitor behind it is visible. So we're going to change our roughness to 0 and transmission, we're going to change to 1. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, we're back in VR, and right off the bat I can see this worked. I can see the monitor now. It's, we just have that static image there, but we can see it. I can now launch the game, and we're going to be able to play this and see this.
Please wait. I am now loading up the game. Have fun.
Just a moment. And there we go. So that's all there is to it. It's not difficult at all to make MAME or any other ROM-based game be part of the VR room that you create. I brought us back to this page just again to show you the features that you can add to Pop Run Local, which is really the Y flip or X flip. So make sure for this, if you need to, when your ROM plays, you can add these on: Y flip, X flip, or both. Always remember that trailing underscore.